My style is ridiculous. Shibbity dop 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 dop. Yes, yes. Skibbity dip dip dop dop. Yes, yes.
Hello all. Sorry for taking 5 billion years, but I overslept. Oops. A while ago, while searching up fanfictions to read, I thought, hey, what if someone took my childhood hyperfixation, Ben 10, and my young adult hyperfixation, RWBY, and crossed them together? And so, I looked through AO3 and fanfiction.net, crawling, searching to see if someone made a fanfiction of this type. There were quite a few, but none piqued my interest as much as this one. This one places Ben and his team as of the end of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, the 5th series in the Ben 10 franchise, into Remnants, the world in which RWBY takes place, alongside having a bunch of other characters from Ben's universe being transported there. We did cover a crossover previously on this channel, that being the Owl and the Frog, which crosses over both Amphibia and the Owl House. When I first read this fanfiction a while back, I thought it was nice. Not exactly great, but nice, despite me not having read the entire thing. Now that I've read more fanfictions, I thought it'd be nice to go back and revisit this fanfiction and see what happened. Will it be just as nice as I remember? Will it be better than I remembered? Or will it be complete dog shit? Today, we'll be reviewing Ben 10X RWBY volumes by the Omni Remnant, so let's get to it. Like every fanfiction review, here's a list of information to keep in mind before proceeding to watch this video. Firstly, I'll only cover 10 chapters per video for this fanfiction, despite it not being the entirety of Volume 1. How long is Volume 1, you may ask? Well... For reference, the longest RWBY volume/season to date is Volume 1 at 16 chapters, and the shortest is Volume 9 at 11 chapters, counting the bonus animatic. Secondly, and this goes without saying, it is strongly advised that you've watched both RWBY and all 4 Ben 10 series in the classic continuity, that being from the original series in 2005 up until Omniverse, especially the former, as this will contain massive spoilers for RWBY Volume 3. Thirdly, this story was published prior to as well as prior to RWBY After the Fall, in which Coco Adele is revealed to be a lesbian. Man, if I had a nickel for every time a fanfiction had a female character be paired up with a male before said female character is revealed to be a lesbian in canon, I'd have 2 nickels. Furthermore, this fanfiction has almost all of Ben 10 Omniverse retcon, sans for Ben having the official Omnitrix and all of its features and transformations. Finally, become a supporter on Patreon or Ko-Fi to gain early access to new videos, Discord perks and more. And I would just like to take a moment to say a huge thanks to all of you for 1,000 subscribers. I cannot put into words how happy I am that I managed to reach this milestone, though it must be stated that I did not accomplish this without the help of all of you, so thanks a trillion for that. Now, with all that out of the way, let us begin. The story begins with Ben Tennyson feeling upset in his room, as well as telling us it's been a whole year since the end of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. Gwen calls Ben to see if he's doing okay after what happened. What happened, you may ask? Well, Ben broke up with Julie. Okay, what do people have against Julie Yamamoto?
Why you bullying me?
She wasn't a bad character, she was genuinely solid, and I don't get why the writers wanted her out for a minor character that only appeared twice in Classic. I don't get that shit. Anyway, Ben recalls his breakup with Julie at the airport. Despite the couple's efforts, Ben's heroic lifestyle just kept clashing with Julie's, and thus they had to break up. With one final kiss, the two part ways before Gwen brings Ben back to the present. Gwen asks Ben if he thinks he's made the right decision, to which Ben says he does, that it saved them both a lot of pain, and that Julie would have been sick of Ben's lifestyle anyway. Their conversation was cut short when the Omnitrix was beeping because Max was calling Ben about a situation, that situation being that Vilgax broke up the plumber headquarters in Bellwood. After Ben turns into Heat Blast, we cut to Max questioning himself why the higher-ups at the plumbers decided to imprison Vilgax in the plumber headquarters instead of somewhere, say, in Karsakon or the Null Void. Plot convenience, that's why. Max then finds Cooper Daniels in the rubble. He's worried at first, but rest assured, he's okay. Vilgax then prepares to fight Max, note that Vilgax here is using his design from Classic, before Ben arrives and kicks his ass. Ben tells Cooper to stay in the rust bucket whilst he asks that Max goes and get the Null Void projector. Vilgax then gives Ben a monologue about how he and his friends have been a thorn in his side for too long, but then Kevin, Levin and Gwen show up in Kevin's car and swerves right into Vilgax, much to Gwen's annoyance since, according to her, the car has a newly installed plasma cannon. Kevin apologizes but justifies it by saying he wants a cool entrance. Honestly, so real of you, man. Anyway, after the two greet him, Ben says
it's hero time!
Phrase before they fight Vilgax. The fight itself is boring as fuck. There's no description at all, aside from being described as seismic in proportions, and one could hear the thunderous sounds of colliding punches from miles away. After the fight ends, Max gets the null void projector, but when he tries to activate it, it malfunctions. Suddenly, the projector sparked and then activated when Max dropped it to the ground. The null void portal opened, and then came Alpha, aka this guy from the Heroes United crossover between Generator Rex and Ben 10. Ben recalls how he met and dealt with Alpha. A lightning strike directly impacts Alpha and the null void portal, causing a sphere to expand outward, engulfing everyone except for Vilgax, who managed to flee into his spacecraft. Once the sphere disappeared, nothing was left. We then cut to Remnant during the fall of Beacon, in particular the scene where Adam Taurus is fighting Blake Belladonna. Same as canon, Yang Xiaolong sees Adam stab Blake, Yang's semblance activates because she's pissed and lunges at Adam, but before Adam could slice Yang's arm off like in canon, a light appears in between them and expands in a burst of energy, knocking the two back before Ben fucking appears out of that like, what? What am I reading? Yang then regains her senses and, oh my god, this is painful to read. Like, who is speaking here? I mean, it's obviously Adam, but you still have to lay it out properly. Anyway, Ben asks what's going on, to which Adam replies that he'll explain once he takes out Blake and Yang. Ben then mocks Adam, stating how he looks more like a villain than them. Adam prepares to fight Ben, but unfortunately for him, Ben turns into swamp fire, shocking both Blake and Yang whilst they witness Ben's transformation. Okay, last time I checked, transformation sequences are only for us, the reader / viewer, to see, as in universe it happens in an instant. Anyway, Ben and Adam fight, the latter being shocked by Swamp Fire's regeneration abilities, whilst Yang tends to Blake's wound. After Ben deals with Adam, he then goes over and heals Blake's wound, amazing them both. The chapter ends with Yang introducing herself to Ben and vice versa. This chapter was not a great start. Whilst the beginning was okay and the characterization was pretty accurate to both series, that's where the positives end. The pacing was way too fast, the dialogue was clunky, and the word choices plus structure just made it feel painful to read. Overall, a really shoddy start. 2 out of 10. The chapter starts with Ben having just explained his backstory to Blake and Yang. Yang was amazed whilst Blake was skeptical before she then goes over everything about remnants, what huntresses and huntsmen are, what combat academies are, and the current predicament, that being the White Fang Attack and Beaking Academy. You know, there's a time and a place for something like that, you know. Essentially, the next few chapters are an alternative version of the Volume 3 final episodes, as we now have Ben in the gang. Then, Blake tearfully demands to know why Yang recklessly tried to save her, stating that Adam would have maimed her or worse. Yang responds that Adam would have killed her, though Blake vehemently denies this, just stating that Adam wants to take everything she cares about away before telling Yang that if she just ran away like she asked, none of this would have happened. Yang then shoves Blake and yeah, like I said, there's a time and a place for this. Anyway, Blake and Yang have their moments before they notice Ben is nearby. Ben tells them that he wants to give them some space before Blake tells him that blasting her abusive ex-boyfriend, Adam, through the wall counts as them being threatened. Then Yang says, and I quote, "Yeah, and if you hadn't gotten here when you did, I would have been disarmed."
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Anyway, Adam reveals himself to be okay to the trio, says he's pissed that Ben came and ruined everything. Ben calls him a bi-horned bitch, with Yang calling Ben Green Boy. Green Boy? Why not call him Watch Boy? You call John Vomit Boy because he puked on the airship to Beacon. Why not call Ben Watch Boy because he uses a watch to transform? Anyway, as Adam was getting heated by Ben calling him names, Kevin and Gwen arrive out of nowhere in Kevin's car and fucking sideswipe him, like, okay. After she chastises Ben for having them worried sick, Gwen is puzzled at the turn of events that happened today. Vilgax escaping, blowing up, entire city block, and a dimensional travel being okay, did the events of Heroes United not happen in this timeline? Well, it clearly did, judging by the cover, so maybe Gwen was just not aware that Ben went to Rex's world for some reason. Then, Gwen introduces herself to Yang and Blake. Ben introduces Yang and Blake to Gwen and Kevin before Yang tells Gwen that Ben has been more helpful than anyone for the past 15 minutes. Blake then reminds them that Adam is probably going to be back soon, and that given her and Yang's auras are low and thus cannot use either of their semblances, once Blake explains what aura and semblances are, agreeing with her like it's mana, Gwen uses her anodite powers to restore Blake and Yang's auras. Their celebration was short-lived, however, as Adam got back up and oh boy, was he pissed. But luckily, Ben turns into Diamond Head to take care of him, saying, "It's hero time," which impresses Yang, leading her to ask if that's his catchphrase. Gee, why fucking wonder? Adam and Diamond Head fight while Yang gets her scroll and calls in the cavalry. Meanwhile, Kevin, after absorbing the metal from his car, helps fend off Adam. Adam prepares to slice through Kevin, but is shocked to see not only Kevin grab the blade out of his hands and absorb it, commenting about how he likes the craftsmanship before he snaps the blade in two. Furious, Adam then looked to see that Gwen swiped his weapon via her anodite magic. Wanting Gwen dead, Adam swung his fist at Gwen intending to kill her, but instead was punching at the mana wall she made. Adam broke his wrists, but he didn't care before Gwen threw the mana wall back at Adam, throwing him back before Gwen grabbed him and punched him in the face repeatedly before throwing him into a wall. Adam then got up only to see Diamond Head charge at him and slam him into a wall. Then Blake uses her wait, since when could Blake use shadow clones? Last time I checked, her semblance only allowed her to make short-lived constructs of herself using stuff made such as ice. I haven't read any of the manga nor novels, and I did hear something about the manga not being canon to begin with, though RWBY never gave a straight answer, so I can't say for sure, but still. The Shadow Clones attack Adam before Yang uses her Embercelia weapon to launch him upwards before the real Blake slices Adam in the chest before he hits the ground, breaking his mask and nose. The group celebrate, but it's cut short when Adam tries to get back up, but he's then stopped by none other than Wai Schnee using her semblance, that being glyphs, to hold Adam in place. He screams fury about how anyone but a Schnee, before then a streak of red appears and struck Adam in the jaw. The chapter ends with that streak being revealed to be Ruby Rose herself holding Crescent Rose. Man, that chapter was... it was something, alright. Whilst I did find the characterization to be more or less accurate to canon, and in terms of formatting it's done well, it still suffered from the pacing being a bit slow, and I think the story having started off the Fall of Beacon ongoing was not a good choice. Shit, I'd wager that this entire story would have been better off had it not began halfway through the Fall of Beacon, and instead happened either through sometime later, or preferably sometime earlier. The dialogue itself is a little bit better, but still quite clunky, though I do find the Alien Force trio beating up Adam to be quite cathartic, and the scene with Blake being all open with Yang is nice in theory, but like I said, there is a time and a place for that. Overall, the chapter is a substantial improvement over chapter 1, earning it a final score of 6 out of 10. The chapter starts off with General James Ironwood and Glinda Goodwitch being in disbelief about how not only the Vital Festival, the main thing that was happening in Season 3, went south very quickly with a full-blown terrorist attack on Beacon Academy, at-legion military assets being compromised and students having gone missing, but hey-ho, they got the likes of Sun Wukong and my fucking goat, Coco Adele. Okay, can I just talk about how much aura this girl emanates? Like, god damn this media, I am begging you, please, just let her have a major role in at least one volume 10 episode. I am begging you. Anyway, Nora Valkyrie and Li Ren were out of action due to their auras having been depleted, staying put until their entire team was present. Velvet Scarlatina and Wai Schnee were doing pretty well, though the former was knocked out and en route to a hospital. Suddenly, out of nowhere, they spotted a recreational vehicle appearing and with an old man in a Hawaiian shirt coming out and began to effortlessly take out several Grimm. That man is none other than Max Tennyson, coming out of the rust bucket. Max then introduces himself to Ironwood and Glinda, explains his background including how Ben can turn into aliens via the Omnitrix, how Gwen is an anodite that can manipulate energy, and how Kevin is Osmosian that can absorb matter. After Max accepts Ironwood asking him for help, Crow then alerts Max that someone else is in the rust bucket with him, and that someone else being Cooper Daniels. Max demands that Cooper stay inside, to which Cooper pleads that he just wants to make himself useful, but then his pleas were cut short when a Beowulf tackled him to the ground, threatening to end his life. Luckily, the Go, aka Coco, came in clutch and saved his life before a bunch more Grimm showed up, much to Coco's chagrin. Coco then told Cooper, and I quote, "You should probably stay here. Wouldn't want that nice blonde head to be eviscerated, right?" No comment. Cut to Weiss and Ruby, who are happy to see that Zwei, their dog, was here to help, and whilst being stunned at the fact that this new guy, Max in his RV the Rust Bucket, appeared out of nowhere, they were at least happy that they got some reinforcements. Weiss then got a DM from Yang on her scroll, telling her that they're in the cafeteria, they're fighting Blake's ex-boyfriend, and Yang almost got her arm cut off. However, Yang then messages Weiss telling them that not only the situation is being sorted as they're readying to fight him, but they also got a surprise with Max telling the duo that the surprise is likely his grandkids. So more chatter later amongst Max, Ironwood, Glinda and Sun Wukong, with some blushing about Blake before Ruby and Weiss arrive to help out Blake and Yang. They arrive and deduce that Ben Tennyson is that crystal looking dude, aka Diamond Head. They sit and watch for a bit before Weiss intervenes using a gravity glyph using Mightynaster, before Ruby then breaks Adam's arm using Crescent Rose. Following the team getting back together, Kevin restrains and then places Adam in the trunk of his car, whilst Ben introduces himself to Ruby and Weiss. though Weiss already knew who Ben was per Max telling her, and deducing that the ginger girl is Gwen and the guy with the car is Kevin. Ben is surprised to hear that Grandpa Max is here too, before Blake then tells the group that not only Adam threatened to take away everything she loved, and that had Ben not intervened, then she could have lost just that. Considering what happened in canon, then I could see why she genuinely felt that way, albeit the actual outcome not being as bad as she feared it could have been. She then took off her bow and revealed her cat ears, though only the Alien Force trio was surprised, before all but stating that Team RWBY is her newfound family. You know, this would be really nice if it wasn't juxtaposed with, you know, the fall of fucking Beacon! Some chatter later with Yang revealing Bumblebee, her motorcycle, with Ben and Kevin having some banter, before Gwen, Blake, Weiss and RWBY head into Kevin's car whilst Ben heads on to Bumblebee with Yang due to Kevin's car not having enough room. Yang calls Ben Green Boy, like, again, out of all the names you could have called him Watch Boy, like the fact he uses the watch to transform, like how some people call Blake a cat girl or give Weiss nicknames based on the fact that she's ice-themed, but no, you just had to stick with Green Boy. Anyway, Ben was nervous to ride that kind of vehicle at high speed whilst not transformed. Okay, so the events of Ben 10,000 and Secret of the Omnitrix have been altered because apparently Ben shows no problem with riding a hoverboard or doing parkour in an old void whilst remaining human at age 10 no less, so I have no idea what happened here. Regardless, after some reassurance from Yang, Ben feels a little more relieved and holds on to Yang. He then sniffs her hair and remarks that it smells like I can already tell what's going to be happening. In Kevin's car, RWBY finds it odd that Yang, despite knowing Ben for not even half an hour, she allowed him to ride on Bumblebee with her, considering that she never let anyone on Bumblebee, sans Neptune when they were investigating the White Fang in Volume 2's mid-season finale. Some more chatter later, and the chapter ends with Bumblebee and Kevin's car driving off. This chapter was... The characterization's pretty nice, and I did like Grandpa Max tearing into Grimm, and of course, my fucking go, Coco Adele being here and using Guy and Duja was really dope, which is by default, mind you. It's by default, she's cool by default, and the tiny bit of chemistry that RWBY and Weiss have with Ben is pretty neat. The chapter still suffers from clunky pacing, and that entire spiel by Blake, whilst nice on his own, once again, suffers from the fact that it's placed right here. Also, Cooper Daniels being here is something I have mixed feelings towards, so... we'll see what happens here. Grammatically, it's fine, formatting's okay, and that leaves chapter 3 with a score of 6 out of 10. The chapter starts off with Cooper inside the rust bucket feeling upset about his perceived lack of usefulness. First when the negative 10 were attacking during the events of Ben 10 vs the negative 10 in Classic, back when the Hybrid were attacking during the events of Undercover in Alien Force, and now this. On the bright side, he wasn't the only person feeling this way, as Nora Valkyrie and Lee Ren were sitting beside him. Cooper asks the two if they're worried about how their teammates are doing, to which Ren confirms. Nora elaborates about how Dawn and Pyrrha, despite only knowing them for a year, are like their older siblings, with her not knowing what to do should something happen, her voice breaking when she explains that. Seeing them both upset just made Cooper feel worse, and lamented on the fact he had no tech to work with. After hearing Cooper explain why, and him being a technopath, Ren asked why Cooper couldn't just use the trashed Atlesian drones nearby, which surprised Cooper, asking why neither of them pointed it out earlier, to which Nora cheekily replied that he never asked. Opening the door, he asked Coco, who was firing at Grimm with Guy and Dusha, to carry him to the pile of destroyed Atlesian drones. Coco is confused at first, but agrees to carry him, once again proving that she's the GOAT as well. Like, she's carrying this guy, which, by the way, looks like this. Strong woman, I tell ya. Whilst Sun is handling the Grimm, Coco takes Cooper towards a scrap heap before he assembles a fully fledged suit, much to the shock of Coco and Ironwood, before he and Coco take out several Grimm, with Coco being very impressed with Cooper, or Tech Head as she calls him. Cut to RWBY and the Alien Force trio. Ben is finding the ride on Bumblebee exhilarating, much to Yang's happiness. Unfortunately, the happiness is short-lived as a bunch of Grimm, specifically Beowulfs, were showing up, but not to worry, Yang fired at them using Embercilia to punch them. Meanwhile, their corpses left a bunch of speed bumps that Kevin kept running over. Wait, don't Grimm dissolve into black dust? After that, RWBY peeked through the sun. Okay, since when was Kevin's car going to have a sunroof? I mean, that visual of her using Crescent Rose like that would go hard though, I can't lie. Then Blake and Weiss followed suit using Gambolt's Shroud and Mightynaster. After taking out those Grimm, Kevin celebrates, but it turns out he did so too soon as a King Taiju Grimm appeared, but not to worry, Kevin's car has a battle mode that fired missiles and had a plasma cannon that made quick work of the Taiju Grimm, much to RWBY's amazement. As the septet made their way towards the docks, Cooper and Coco were dealing with a bunch of Beowulfs when the Alien Force trio and RWBY arrived. Coco was surprised to see Ben riding on Bumblebee, noting how Yang never let anyone ride on Bumblebee, but then recognized that maybe Yang has the hots for Ben. Also, were they headed for the docks? Last time I checked, Beacon's courtyard was nowhere near the docks. Anyway, the Alien Force trio plus RWBY were surprised to find no Grimm, but were happy to see that was because of Cooper and Coco, with Yang calling the former Tin Man. Then a Nevermore Grimm arrived, but not to worry, using an upturned piece of pavement as a makeshift ramp, Ben drives it up whilst Ben activates the Omnitrix to transform into Humongosaur, much to Nora's amazement. Humongosaur then grabs onto the Nevermore before the others follow them, either in Kevin's car, Yang on Bumblebee, or Cooper carrying Coco. The Nevermore carried Humongosaur for a while before he then changed size, causing the Grimm to fall onto the ground. Humongosaur grabs the Grimm's wings and snaps onto them before he then snaps the creature's neck, leaving it limp, and it doesn't dissolve into dust. Dude, come on. Anyway, Ben is now happy to see Max before Max introduces him to General Ironwood, Glinda Goodwitch, and Crow Brawen, the latter saying that just because he saved Yang doesn't immediately make him buddy-buddy. Then Nora introduces herself and Ren to Ben, then Sun introduces himself before Cooper introduces Coco to Ben. Some chatter later and we have Coco addressing Yang, RWBY, Weiss and Blake as Yangarang, Rubes, Weiss Cream and Kit Kat respectively. You know, I respect that. After Crow embraces Yang and RWBY in a hug, we then cut to Blake being surprised that Sun was still here, worried about his injuries and why he didn't go with the rest of his team. Sun replied that he was just waiting for Blake and we get a sappy romantic... Okay, as much as I ship Bumblebee, I still think Black Sun is a good ship, or Eclipse is a cooler name, don't get me wrong. But my god, if you're going to write a relationship, don't make it so quick that the relationship doesn't develop naturally at all and instead it happens too quick for us to care. Though, to be fair, the relationship in Volume 1 to 2, which happens around the same time frame as canon in this story, could count to it being developed naturally, but I digress. Ben then presents the unconscious Adam Torres to Ironwood in Kevin's car. Ironwood thanks the trio, but then Glinda tells him that he still needs to focus on that Groom Dragon, despite the fact that said Groom was retreating due to the Alien Force trio plus Max and Cooper's arrival giving them hope. They should have been lured into that false sense of security though, since the Grimm aren't that stupid and are probably going to figure out something, and thus the group must evacuate everyone ASAP. Meanwhile, Ben activates the Omnitrix and prepares to transform into an alien to deal with the Grimm. However, Nora staunchly refuses, stating that they're not leaving without either Jean-Arc or Pyrrha Nikos before she explains to Ben who they are. Then Jean calls them like in canon, pleads them to help Pyrrha, explains that she's at the top of Beacon's CCT tower fighting a woman, that being Cinder Fall, before he then breaks down in tears and hangs up. The chapter then ends with Ben turning into Chromastone, assuring Nora and the others that they'll be back before he and Gwen fly to the top of Beacon's tower like, huh? Okay, so now this fic is making Chromastone's flight an actual ability instead of a one-off error by the writers? Okay then. This chapter was... well, I'll explain. What I liked was Coco and Cooper dealing with the Grimm via Cooper's tech powers. That was pretty neat, as well as the Alien Force trio and Team RWBY taking out those Grimm. I thought that was cool, as well as the chemistry between RWBY and the Alien Force trio being nice to see, as is the chemistry between Cooper and Coco. However, the chapter is still held back by questionable word choices, dialogue that lean towards the clunky side, as well as deviating from the source material, like I'm sure Grimm dissolve into nothing upon death. Also, this sappy moment between Blake and Sun is just... ugh. There's a time and a place for that, you know. Anyhow, with that being said, the chapter gets an overall score of 5 out of 10. Okay, this is your last chance to click off the video if you haven't watched RWBY up until Volume 3. Okay? You have? Good. The chapter starts off with the fight between Pyrrha Nikos and Cinder Fall, similar to how it is in canon. Pyrrha had not only had her aura drained, but one of her weapons, Marlowe, was destroyed by Cinder. And not only that, but also Cinder had shot her in the ankle, meaning she knew she was pretty much cooked. As did Cinder, who, like in canon, now has the powers of the Full Maiden. She gives Pyrrha a monologue. Pyrrha asks if she believed in destiny. Cinder says yes before she then prepares to deliver the killing blow. But, unlike canon, an energy blast came out of nowhere and shot the arrow, destroying it. Turned out, that was from Ben Tennyson, who turned into Chromastone, who is now floating on a platform created by Gwen before he then said, yeah, about that, I'm going to have to ask you not to kill her. And that he has some new friends that would be really upset if she did kill her. As Gwen floated towards Pyrrha to tend to her injuries, Ben introduces himself to Cinder before Cinder explains that she's recently acquired the Four Maiden's powers, to which Ben asks that she prove it before they then fight. Meanwhile, Gwen inspects Pyrrha's wound, whilst Pyrrha looks at Ben and Cinder in disbelief, even more so when Gwen said it was his cousin, though Gwen elaborated that it doesn't look like this normally, whilst she uses her Anodite powers to erase the arrow and stop the bleeding. She then said that an injury like this would be better suited for someone like Swampfire to take care of. She then remarks, us redheads have to stick together after all. Ben and Cinder fight, Ben throws quips at her, no surprises here cause well, he's Ben 10. Cinder blasts Ben via her maiden powers, but is shocked to see him not only tank it, but remark how it's not her smartest move given that he's literally made of rock. Cinder sieves at Ben and rants about how she can make entire kingdoms tremble at her feet, only for Ben to promptly tell her to shut up as a billion other villains said similar things before he then knocks her out of the tower. Just before she hits the ground, she disappears in a black mist. This confuses Ben, but he doesn't dwell on it for too long before he then goes over to Gwen and Pyrrha. After Gwen tells him that she needs her alien to help Pyrrha, Ben switches to Swampfire and uses his plant powers to heal Pyrrha's arrow wound via making a cast. Pyrrha asks what these two people even are, but before Gwen could explain, the Omnitrix times out and reverts Ben back. Okay, I'm sure the Omnitrix doesn't flash red when it times out in Omniverse, only the original one did before it recalibrated, but I guess that's just a little nitpicky. Anyway, Pyrrha asks why Ben and Gwen came to save her. After they tell her that it's because it's the right thing to do, Pyrrha replies that she didn't deserve to be saved. Ben and Gwen are shocked and ask her why. Pyrrha explains the whole idea with the Four Maiden, Pyrrha accidentally killing Penny, Amber getting killed by Cinder, Ozpin being killed by Cinder, and that if she didn't hesitate to take the Four Maiden powers sooner, this situation wouldn't have happened and that Penny and Ozpin may still be alive, and Cinder would not have had Amber's powers. Ben was confused, but Pyrrha elaborates that she asked Jawn about this, to which he said yes, though he did not give any specifics given the circumstances, secrecy and all. Ben gives Pyrrha the good news that Jawn's alive after Pyrrha showcases worry for him. After Pyrrha shows regret for not accepting Maiden powers sooner, Ben explains that it's okay to choose their own destiny and recalls to when he met two future versions of himself, Ben 10,000 in Classic and Ultimate Ben in Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, and that the future is not set in stone, plus not wanting to lose herself or her friends doesn't make Pyrrha selfish. Some more chatter about Ozpin's circle comprising Ironwood, Good Witch and Crow before Pyrrha reveals that she shoved Jawn into a rocket launcher, that's what I'm calling them, after kissing him on the lips, much to the cousin's shock. After Gwen presents Pyrrha with the fragments of her weapon, we cut to pardon me. After Gwen presents Pyrrha with the fragments of her weapon, we cut to the ground with RWBY pacing back and forth, worried about Pyrrha, though Yang reassures her by saying if something went wrong. They would have seen it by now. Lucky for them, RWBY spots Ben, Gwen and Pyrrha descending on Gwen's mana constructs. The celebration is short-lived when the Wyvern Greenwood descends and lands behind them, and unfortunately, the Omnitrix is still recharged. Oh wait, no, it's all charged up again. Okay. Ben turns into Clockwork and dispatches it via aging it rapidly. Cue the reunion with Nora and Ren. Yeah, I'm speeding through this. I want this to be out before 2025 and this RWBY explaining that was Emerald, that it was fucking with Pyrrha's mind, leading her to split Penny into quarters. Sorry, I can't resist. Before RWBY hugs Pyrrha with some sweet dialogue to back it up. Yang is impressed with Clockwork and for fuck's sake, call him Watch Boy! I know I've said it before, but for fuck's sake, this annoys me more than it should. We got to Ben and Gwen going up to Kevin dealing with an unconscious Adam in the infirmary alongside Ironwood and Glinda. The two thank the Alien Force trio before Ben tells them that Cinder has the Maiden's powers, much to Ironwood's dismay. Cut to the streets of Vale with Jawn looking incredibly worried and distraught. Thankfully, the Alien Force trio alongside RWBY, Pyrrha, Nora and Ren arrive. Jawn tearfully reunites with Pyrrha before Ben, Gwen and Kevin introduce themselves to Jawn alongside telling them that had Ben and Gwen not arrived, then Pyrrha would have, well... Anyway, Yang also elaborates that the Alien Force trio saved all their asses. Okay girl, no need to be glazing, we get it. Gwen then explains they need to find a way home. Jawn is confused, even more so when RWBY says they're not of this Earth. Okay, how the fuck does RWBY know what Earth is? As in like, how does she know what the planet is? They didn't tell them, so, like, I don't think so. So, how? Anyway, they're interrupted by someone who sounds like Ben. It turns out that someone was none other than Mercury Black alongside Emerald Systrive. Okay, I found that part kind of funny considering both Ben and Mercury are voiced by Yuri Lowenthal. Mercury and Emerald try talking shit to the group much to Yang's fury, with Mercury mocking her before Emerald prepares to attack them. Following him pissing Mercury off and thus causing Mercury to lunge at him, Ben turns into wrath and, with some encouragement from Nora, straight up rips Mercury's prosthetic legs off and beats the shit out of him like, oh my god, he's going full Agragor on him. Much to the cringe of everyone else stands Yang, RWBY, Nora and Coco. Then Yang comes over and beats him with Embercelia until his aura is drained. Emerald then tells him to knock it off, only for Yang and Ben, as wrath, to tell them to piss off, with Ben saying something not so family friendly. The chapter then ends with Ben timing out and the group going out to get food whilst Jean babbles incoherently in disbelief about what he just witnessed. This chapter was pretty neat, all things considered. I liked the fight between Ben and Cinder. The dialogue was a little campy there, but I did find Ben taking the piss out of Cinder to be pretty funny, and Pyrrha's regret over not taking the maiden powers was done nicely. Whilst I did sorta like Pyrrha's reunion with Nora and Ren, I do wish there was a little more to it. I found the fight against Mercury and Emerald funny solely because of wrath, but nothing else. Word choices are a little better, pacing is fine, and thus this rounds off this chapter with getting the highest score so far of 7 out of 10. The chapter begins inside a hospital in Vale with the Alien Force trio, Team RWBY, Nora, Pyrrha and Ren having explained to Jawn everything from Ben and his crew's arrival, Adam being dealt with and Pyrrha being saved. Gwen adds that they have no way of returning back home, though Yang tries to lighten the mood by saying everyone's alive, but Pyrrha still has to remind everyone that not... Okay, we get it, you feel bad over Penny and Ozpin. Anyway, some chatter ensues and Ben reassures the group that they're not alone in the feeling of not being ready for something like the attack on Beacon, revealing that he's had the Omnitrix since age 10, generally speaking anyway, during summer vacation, and that during said summer vacation he learned not to be a dickhead to Gwen, though Gwen was being a dickhead to him, like come on Gwen, he's still your cousin. Anyway, Kevin warns that Earth is vulnerable to the likes of Vilgax now that the Alien Force trio plus Max is out of the picture, but Ben isn't too worried as he's confident Murph will sort it out. In the meantime, however, the trio decide to stay and train on Remnants, much to Nora's excitement. Jawn brings up that there isn't really anywhere to train, much less stay, to which Yang assures them that Taiyang, and RWBY's father, will let them stay in Patch, and that he even has his own training facility? Since when? Since when could this guy afford to have a giant-ass training facility? Anyway, some chatter later, and Ben reveals, among other things, that he has his own theme song, and it's the Ben 10 theme song. Man, I sure hope this isn't a sign of this fic having a large portion of it be dedicated to RWBY characters reacting to pop culture from Earth. That would be quite boring, don't you think? Anyway, everyone finds it super cool. Cooper and Coco come in, with the latter explaining that due to Cooper's injuries, he'll be staying with Coffee for the time being. Lucky bastard. Some chatter later, Weiss gets a call from Jock Schnee, her dad, telling her that he has to come back to Atlas. Ben and Gwen try to explain something, but Weiss cuts them off, stating that no matter what, her dad gets whatever he wants no matter what, given that he's the CEO of the Schnee Dust Company, and that Weiss is the High-Ress. Gwen then says that they'll plan to make sure she doesn't return to Atlas. Weiss objects, but Pyrrha cuts her off, stating, "After what happened today, I've come to realise something, and that is we all shape our own destinies, our own lives. If you wish to be out of your father's shadow, now might be the perfect time to do it, but you have to be the one to make that decision." Or something like that. After the group devises a plan that involves straight up lying to Jacques and Pyrrha requiring a wheelchair, we cut to the group discussing things whilst heading to the comms room before someone knocks on the door just as Kevin was about to explain stuff about Earth. He opens it and lo and behold, it's Jawn's father. Cut to the comms room and the group meets up with General Ironwood. After greeting the group, Weiss heads to a computer and tells her father that she'll remain in Vale due to it being where she's needed the most, which her father agrees. What? Okay, if anyone has been paying attention to the Schnee family in the series, then you'll probably recognise that Jacques is, well, not exactly the most reasonable person. Like, come on, are we watching the same show? Anyway, Ironwood tells Weiss that her sister, Winter, is en route, before Weiss tells Gwen that the meeting went well, and God, this dialogue is so jank. Cut to Ben and Pyrrha meeting with Glinda. Glinda apologises to Pyrrha, but Pyrrha says it's fine, and after some chatter catching up, Pyrrha then speaks to her mother, Athena, not her canon name as it's been unconfirmed, who's relieved to see her daughter alive, yet is worried about her being in a wheelchair and having vines wrapped around her ankle. Athena talks to Jawn for a bit, saying that Pyrrha keeps talking with him, making Jawn blush, before she then turns her attention to Ben, whom she mistakenly calls Ren, not helping that both Ben and Ren wear green, as well as having similar sounding names. After that, she then tells Pyrrha that it's best she leave Vale and return to her hometown of Argus and Mistral. Pyrrha declines, insisting that she stay with her team in Vale and that she'll be heading to Patch in a few days. After a short conversation, Athena reveals that she'll be moving to Vale in a few days, much to Pyrrha, Ben and Jawn's surprise. Some chatter later and we cut to Jawn, Ben and Pyrrha heading towards Jonathan, Jawn's father, after Gwen told Jawn that his dad will be here, much to his shock. They enter the room and see that Jonathan was recalling how Jawn is allergic to red tree sap before he turns and hugs Jawn, much to Jawn's embarrassment. Some chatter later, and fucking hell, this is skippable, my god the pacing is so slow. Anyway, some more yapping later and Grandpa Max arrives and greets the group. He reveals he bought the mattresses, cots, and other things to the hospital alongside Zwei, RWBY and Yang's dog, inside the rust bucket. After revealing that he has to discuss the attack on Beacon with Crow and Ironwood, once the former sobers up that is, Max shows the group DVDs that Ben, Gwen and Kevin left, and those DVDs are his the Jurassic Park trilogy. After explaining that dinosaurs were a species that ruled the Earth 66 million years ago, Ben puts the first movie into a DVD player and that ends a chapter. This chapter is... The dialogue is clunky and the pacing is just unimaginably slow. This chapter would have been better if it was just condensed to half its size for what it is. The characterization is on point for the most part, but that's all I really say positively wise, aside from it being written relatively okay. Overall, this chapter is quite mediocre, earning it a 5 out of 10. Chapter 7 begins with Gwen waking up and recalling what happened between now and the previous chapter. Ruby, Juniper really liked Jurassic Park, and now Yang, Nora, Ruby, Jean and Pyrrha are fans of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Anyway, Gwen was stretching when Blake walked in the room. Gwen was surprised to see that Blake also gets up this early, and the reason being, to see Sun of course, with Blake blushing when Gwen figures that out. Anyway, they chat for a bit, talking about how Skrulls can record fights. Wait, is that in canon? I don't know. And that Gwen could learn a thing or two by watching them. Anyway, after some chatter, we cut to Blake meeting up with Sun and the rest of his team, Sun in the hospital, with all but Neptune having seen better days, though Neptune did have some minor injuries. Sun reveals that Ruby, Weiss, Yang, Juniper, the Alien Force trio, Max, Cooper and Coffee are also going to be staying in patch with Yang and Ruby. Sun hesitates on joining Blake, but Neptune tells him it's alright since he knows that Sun really wants to go with Blake, and thus tells him that it's okay to leave. Anyway, cut to Yang waking up to find Ben sitting by the window, or Green Boy, and no, that name will never not be terrible. They chat about Jurassic World and dinosaurs for a bit before they head downstairs for breakfast. Upon arrival, they're greeted by Cooper and Coffee. Cooper introduces Fox, Velvet and Yasuhashi to Ben, who promptly greets them. Ben asks the Go, aka Coco, if Cooper had been giving her any grief, much to Cooper's annoyance. Then Cooper puts her hand on Cooper's shoulder. I am so fucking jealous. And tells Cooper that Ben is just trolling, before she then tells Ben that he's been fine and also has told them about Earth. Velvet asks Ben if he could transform into aliens like Cooper said and as she could see. Ben declines since he doesn't know who he's watching and that he's trying to restart the whole secret identity thing. I mean, considering this is a world where there are animal people, monsters that want everyone dead, and most importantly, an unknown number of the population has superpowers which are ill-defined and thus theoretically have infinite possibilities, I'd say keeping an ability to alter your DNA into different creatures via the use of an alien wristwatch a secret is probably redundant. Anyway, Yang asks why Gwen has Blake's scroll and where she is. Gwen answers that she has Blake's scroll to learn from the fights that were recorded and that Blake went up to meet Sun. Yang then remarks how haphazardly she rushed in to try and save Blake, remarking that she almost lost her right arm. Can confirm. Gwen emphasizes with her and recalls when she went apeshit when D and aliens attacked her, brother Ken and Grandpa Max in a Ben 10 Alien Force episode, Max Out. Some chatter later and Ben now bets movies on if he could beat Yang in a fight. Cut to 30 minutes later with the group being joined by Kevin, Ruby, Weiss, Juniper, Blake and Sun. When discussing as to what vehicle should be used to get onto the ferry to patch, Ruby, Weiss, Blake and Sun ride with Gwen and Kevin in Kevin's car. Juniper goes in a rust bucket and guess where Ben goes? Yep, he goes with Yang on Bumblebee. Who could have seen that coming? Cooper opts to stay with Coffee in the hospital as he believes he's more needed here and Glinda's paying him to do so. Then Ironwood shows up and gives Ben, Gwen, Kevin and Cooper cars to buy stuff as it's unlikely they'll be getting a job, but asks that they don't spend all of it too quickly. The discussion then turns to the identity of those responsible for the attack on Beacon. Ironwood then shows them a holographic screen showcasing the portraits of Emerald Sistri, Mercury Black and Cinder Fall. Ruby recalls to her potentially being the girl she fought on the night of the dance in the CCT tower. Ironwood notes she was likely trying to disable the CCT tower, to which Ben asks what those are. Some Ruby lore here, skip to this timestamp if you don't want to listen. CCT towers, or cross-continental transmit towers, are essentially radio towers located across remnants that allow for communication between all four kingdoms. Whilst there are several across remnants, the four major ones are located at the four combat academies: Beacon in Vale, Haven in Mistral, Atlas in the kingdom of the same name, and Shade in Vacuo. Now, one may ask why couldn't they just launch satellites into orbit, and the reason they don't do that is because dust, the thing that powers Remnant's entire civilization, doesn't function past the Kármán line, which is what I presume they mean by outside of Remnant's atmosphere, and thus spaceflight is not yet possible for those on Remnant. Why doesn't dust work outside of Remnant's atmosphere, or why couldn't they just use some alternative for power and propellant such as sulfuric acid or hydrolox respectively, which, mind you, are very easy to produce, especially with how technologically advanced they are? I don't fucking know. Ask the writers, not me. There's zero explanation given for that, and it's bullshit, I say. Anyway, that topic is best saved for another video, but I digress. Anyway, Jean accidentally reveals the existence of the maidens to the group, in which the assistance of Crow forces Ironwood to reveal what the maidens are, though Pyrrha explains, starting with, "Everyone, what's your favourite fairy tale?" Everyone is in complete shock apart from Pyrrha, who feels guilty. Jean asks Pyrrha if this is what she meant by destiny, to which Pyrrha apologises. Jean says it's okay. Pyrrha is confused as to why he's not angry at her for lying. Jean, Nora and Ren comfort her and tell her that they all do things they regret, to which Pyrrha says, "Thank you so much, all of you, and I'm glad that you do not hate me." What the fuck is this? Okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. You know what? Why this video took so long is because this fanfiction is so unbearably slow and just not fun to read at all. I was intending on covering all 10 chapters, but fuck man, these chapters are such a chore to read. From reading the rest of this chapter, it's meh. All things considered, 5 out of 10, get out of my sight. In conclusion, Ben 10X RWBY Volume 1 was, at least the first 6.5 chapters, meh. First off, the characters. The Ben 10 characters were written reasonably well, close to canon. Out of all of them, Omni Remnant does a remarkable job at capturing Ben's personality. The Remnant characters do fall apart, but they stay in character, for the most part anyway. I say for the most part because, my god, the Ben and Yang ship that's building up feels incredibly forced. Whilst it's not as bad as it could have been, such as, say, Loyalty Among Worlds or The Seventh Son, the fact it's becoming obvious this early on speaks volumes about the biggest problem this fic has. The budding ship between Cooper and Coco isn't too bad though. I am puzzled as to why Coco and Cooper are out of all people. There's too little of Black Sun in this fic to make a conclusion that's different to the one I'd make if I just looked at the canon progression. The same with Arcos. The chemistry between Ben 10's characters and RWBY's characters is fine, nothing really to write home about, and there were some parts such as Ben fighting Cinder that I found really nice, and the joke about Mercury and Ben sounding the same because they're both voiced by Yuri Lowenthal was pretty funny. But that doesn't change the fact this fanfiction suffers from clunky dialogue and questionable word choices, and the one thing that makes this fic just not fun is the pacing. Good lord, the pacing is atrocious. It's either way too fast for me to digest anything and be immersed, or way too slow to the point where I more often than not get insanely bored whilst reading any chapter. I'd wager that this fic would be cut in half if you simply just fixed the pacing. The first chapter, at least how I see, the author didn't even try to make a good introduction and get RWBY fans familiar with the Ben 10 universe. It was as though the author felt like they had to show how the Ben 10 characters ended up here and thus didn't give a shit about writing a decent first chapter. Though I will say the pacing did gradually improve towards the last chapters we covered, but it still wasn't that much. The fact that Yang doesn't get her arm sliced off really doesn't bode well, as in canon, Yang's losing her arm, a depressive episode, and her building back her confidence and finding herself again, is a major character arc that I genuinely enjoy, and thus without her character just stagnates. The fanfiction deviates from the source material a lot, and I don't mean the AU aspect, which should be incredibly obvious. I mean established facts in lore being altered, such as some green disintegrating into dust and some not for some reason. Grammar's fine, no complaints there, the formatting's fine for the most part, and if I had to label one positivity, it'd be Ben turning into aliens and fighting Grim alongside RWBY characters. It's just so fucking raw. Like, come on, tell me that isn't cool as hell. As well as the fact that Ben Tennyson was written incredibly well. As to whether I recommend this fanfiction, I'm not too sure. What I do recommend is that certain chapters are best served having just been skimmed through or skipped altogether, as this fic does have plenty of potential to be great. And I did read a little more of the fic up until chapter 30, and it does get a little better, and so if you're a fan of both Ben 10 and RWBY, you could give this fic a go, though it depends whether you like it or not. With that being said, the first 7 chapters get a score of 5 out of 10. Pretty disappointing all things considered, that I'm a big fan of both series. I'll cover the 2 remaining chapters as some sort of bonus video before later covering the rest, but for now, I can finally put this godforsaken video behind me and move on to the next fic. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters, your support will forever be appreciated. Link is down below if you want to support me and gain exclusive perks. Click that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all later.